get a lot of questions and people reaching out asking me to talk about relocating and moving your life overseas, particularly as you get older. What's it like? Is it hard? Because I think a lot of people glamorize the idea of living overseas and want to explore the idea for themselves. So I wanted to do a podcast about this by myself so that I could just sit and waffle about my experiences. Because for a bit of background, I left home at 18 and I moved to Spain and lived there for 6 months before moving to Australia, living there for over a year, New Zealand for over a year, and then Canada, Thailand, Japan, Canada again, Tenerife, Malaysia, and now Bali. So I think that I probably have a reasonable resume of starting over in new countries that qualify me to talk about this one solo. The first thing that I would get at is there are big pros and cons to doing it. So just be aware of the trade-offs that you're going to make. The biggest benefit to it is in terms of life experience. There's an old expression that the cure to racism is travel. And what that's getting at is when you travel to different countries with different cultures and you meet different people of different religions and different backgrounds, you realize that everyone is human, and in your hometowns where you might grow up in an environment which is predominantly one religion or predominantly one culture, you expose yourself to many others and you make friends with people from many others and build good connections. So that's one benefit. I think definitely through the life that I've chosen, compared to most people my age, I would definitely say that I have more life experience and a wider variety of cultural exposure, which I wouldn't trade off for anything. But there are cons that come with this as well, right? One of the biggest things is most people my age will have deeper foundations and better relationships than I do. And that's an honest truth, because if you set roots in just one place and then you know the people there for 10, 20, 30 years, of course you're going to know them on a deeper level and trust them and connect with them on a deeper level than people that you've just met for a few months. It's something that I have come to terms with, and in this day and age, you have social media, you can reach out to people, but everyone knows that messaging or even video calls, they don't offer the same level of connection as meeting someone in person and just sitting there, giving each other your full attention, right? And the ability to be sat there in person and pair bond and feel what each other's actually feeling is definitely different. So why do you want to do it? Why do you want to move overseas and start over? Why do I want to do it time and time again and keep starting over? I think for me personally, I have attention issues, and that ranges from struggling to focus on one thing for 10 minutes to struggling to be in one place, one job, even one relationship for a few months at a time. So for me, it's definitely a personality thing. I love the excitement of starting over and rolling the dice and just seeing, what awaits me in a new country, who awaits me in a new country, and where it's going to lead. Whereas for some people, they would much rather have the stability. And one of my best friends said to me, there's no part of my life that he would want. And that might sound kind of insulting, but it's not. He is a far more risk-averse, creature comforts kind of person, and the idea of constantly starting over, of constantly not knowing how this next year is going to pan out, would be too stressful for him, and for a lot of people that would be. So you've got to ask yourself, are you someone that is comfortable with uncertainty, comfortable with risk, comfortable with being an outsider? Because especially when you move to a new country, for the first 3 to 6 months, you're going to be. When I moved to Malaysia last year, I moved there to work for a big finance firm that I'd had my eyes on for a while and I really wanted to go and be a part of. And I knew that it was going to be hard. I knew that when I moved there, I wasn't going to immediately be close with people in the company. I knew I wasn't immediately going to have friends. And I also knew that it was going to take me time to build up progress and momentum in the job. And I remember I was sat on the couch sort of 3 months in, and I was feeling pretty lonely. The success hadn't come in the job yet. And I was sat on the couch just thinking, oh, this is hard. I was feeling a little bit homesick. And I had to remind myself that this is what hard feels like. I said to myself when I was moving over there that it wasn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows, and there were going to be times when it was hard. And when that hard moment came, I had to remind myself that this is what I'd signed up for and I'd told myself that I could deal with. So if you're going to move over to the other side of the world, there is 100% going to come a time when you're feeling homesick, when you're craving the connection of your family and your friends back home. And at that point, for a lot of people, they go home. Right? 2 of my best friends came out to stay with me in Australia when I moved out there. And each of them hit that point, I think around the 4-month mark, where they missed home. And both of them said, okay, that's enough for me. I'm going to head back. And I continued living there, continued traveling, and they went home. They had a wonderful time and a wonderful array of experiences. But for them, they didn't want to fight through the homesickness, which comes for everyone. And that was a sign for them to knock the trip on the head. So what's right for you obviously will change from person to person based on your experiences, based on your level of comfort with the uncertainty and your desire to make things work, right? For me, I guess one thing that helped was I never really felt like I fit in at home, whereas these guys definitely did. They were far more popular at home than I was. They had good groups of friends that they clicked with a lot better than I did. So I think that's another thing for me, was that I never felt like I had too much to go back to. Which leads me on to one of the other best things about traveling. When I was growing up, I was never a popular kid. And, recently I've started to analyze why that was. And I think a lot of it started with my father and the lessons that he taught me, which caused me to approach social situations in a pretty horrendous way. But at the time, when you're in your teenage years, you don't understand that. You just feel like you're an outcast, right? You just feel like you don't really fit in. And in my case, I tried too hard to fit in. People can feel that. People can feel when someone doesn't feel comfortable in themselves, in that friendship group, and they're trying too hard. And it makes them uncomfortable as well. So it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle of non-popularity. When I went traveling, it took me some time, but I found a group of people that I'd never had when I grew up, where I could just be 100% myself around them, and they loved me for who I was. They accepted me for who I was. And it was the first time in my life that I started to think, okay, maybe I'm not, a socially awkward outcast that I grew up thinking that I was. Maybe it was just the wrong group of people that I was trying to fit into. And I now know 100% that that is the case. I'd spent my whole life trying to force my way into the group of the cool kids, and it was never my group of people. I didn't fit in with them. But when I found people that I actually did, and I felt I don't actually need to try and be something that I'm not now, I'm loved for who I am, that was a pretty wonderful feeling and a wonderful point of my journey in both traveling and self-growth and self-acceptance. So if you are someone that has felt like you've been a bit of an outcast at home, then I would say traveling is probably a better idea for you than it is for most people, because you just haven't found your group of people yet. One wonderful thing about the internet is no matter what your quirks are, no matter what your interests are, you're able to find in the 8 billion people in the world, other people that are similar to you in those respects and share your values or share your passions. But again, just connecting with them over the internet isn't enough. I heard a study fairly recently talking about oxytocin and talking about how social media accepts it. So for those that don't know, oxytocin is the chemical that is released in the brain, which causes us to feel connected. It causes us to pair bond with people. And it is one of the fundamental chemicals in the brain that we need to be released in order to be happy. We need serotonin, we need dopamine, we need oxytocin. And in today's day and age of social media and chat rooms on the internet, messaging people, when we use those and we connect with people on the internet, it releases a small amount of oxytocin. But interestingly, the way that the brain works when it comes to oxytocin is similar to the way that it works with sugar and things like that. When we have sugar, if we have it in small amounts, it will cause the brain to want more, to crave more. Whereas if we go completely without it, those cravings will subside after a period of time. Think about yourself. Is it easier to have no sweets or have one sweet from the bag and then not eat anymore? If you're anything like me, as soon as you've had one, you're then craving to go back for more and more, right? And you're better off just not having any at all. This is the same way that the brain works with oxytocin and with connection. What I mean by this is, and I'm not recommending that anyone just forsakes or connection. It's just something to bear in mind if you're feeling lonely. When we message people that we feel connected to, for example, you'll see big examples of this in long distance relationships. When you're messaging the person that you love, you care about, you feel yourself just wanting more, right? You just wish that they were there in person and you could squeeze them. I get this with my family, and I've had this when I do long distance relationships as well, that often I think I want to call them, and then when I call them, it just makes it so much worse. So, kind of waffled on getting to this point. If all you're getting is online interactions, it can actually make you feel lonelier. If you've found that the only people that understand you, the only people that you click with, you connect with online, you're probably going to feel lonelier as a person. And by traveling, if you do what I've done and you just move around and you just keep going with complete freedom to stop wherever you want, but you keep going until you find somewhere that feels right with a group of people that feel right, you will be able to surround yourself with people that cure that for you and will give you the level of oxytocin that you need in order to feel fulfilled, in order to feel love, and in order to feel happiness, which you won't be able to just do online. So that's another reason why I would highly recommend traveling for certain people. Now let's tackle another aspect of it completely, which is the actual process, what actually happens when you move somewhere. What do you need to bear in mind? The first thing is visas. I had a friend of mine at an old job who booked a holiday to go to the States for 2 weeks. She got to the airport and then they said to her, "You haven't got a visa." She's like, "I need a visa?" And for many people, you might hear that and think, well, of course you need a visa. Like I did. I couldn't believe that had happened. But yeah, she missed out on her holiday for 2 weeks and her friends went on their own because they sorted out and she didn't. That's one thing to bear in mind. It's a lot easier to get a visa to just go and travel somewhere than it is to get a visa to go and live somewhere. It also varies based on your passport. And whilst I don't think it's fully fair, if you look at countries like Australia, for example, there are some passports they will let in to go and do the working holiday visa, and then some passports which they won't, or it becomes a lot more difficult to do so. So you need to make sure that it's somewhere that will give you the right to stay there longer term and work there. You can get digital nomad visas in a lot of places these days, and a quick Google search will give you the top few that could be a good option for you. And a lot of them can come with tax benefits as well. But for a lot of people, you don't work remote jobs. And quitting your job to then go to another country to try and find work can be quite a scary thing, right? Especially if you've got a finite budget, which most people do. You think, what if I don't find work? What if? So I think you've got to be comfortable with the what ifs. For me, I always run through the worst case. What if I go to a place and I don't find the work that I need? Or I have done this in the past. Now, thankfully, I work remotely. But it's okay. If I go there and I don't find work, then I will find somewhere else. I will move there and I will try and find work there. And if it doesn't work, worst case is I retreat back to my hometown with my tail between my legs, where I know I can find work. I then build up some money and then I try again. The worst case is you have a hiccup and you have to regroup and try again, right? It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. It just seems a lot more scary doing it in another country where you don't have that support network around you. So make sure, first thing, you can get a visa in the country that you want to go to that will enable you to do the work that you need to do and enable you to live there for the time that you want to. Second thing is connection, which I touched on earlier. Like if you already have connections in a certain place, that can be an amazing in to help you start building your network. You have an in to friends that will then start introducing you to other friends, and it is a fast track to building that network, right? Because you're vouched for. Most of the places that I've gone to, I haven't had this, and it is significantly slower to build that social network and that friendship group when you head down that route. But it's still entirely possible, and it will inevitably happen if you are persistent at it as well. So it's not needed, but it is an option. Now, let's say you move somewhere and you haven't got any connections there. How do you go about building connections and friendship groups there? The biggest thing I would advocate for is trying to meet people organically. If you get a job, I worked in hospitality for a lot of the countries that I went to. I'd just go and get a job in a bar. Sometimes if I didn't actually need the job, I would still get a part-time job in a bar, because you just meet a load of people in a friendly environment, and it's a good way to start building a network. The other thing is clubs. For me, I've always been really into sports like jiu-jitsu. Now I'm quite heavily into paddle and the gym. If you get yourself into groups and clubs that are doing those kind of things, then you're going to inevitably meet people and make friends that way as well. The next way is slightly less organic, which is you join apps or head down routes with technology that enables you to find people. There are dating apps that also have make friends parts of them. I'm pretty sure Bumble has like a Bumble friends group. And I know that a lot of women use this to meet other women that they want to make friends with in a new place. Then there are apps like Time Left, which you sign up to go for dinner with 5 strangers, and you just go and meet a bunch of people that you haven't met before, and you have dinner, which is another good option. Going back to the organic one of the biggest things that I missed, actually, which is probably the single biggest way that I met people when I was traveling, was staying in hostels. Now, the idea of staying in a hostel now, honestly, I can't think of much worse. But especially when you're younger, when you are sharing a room with a bunch of other people who are in the same boat as you, they've also left home, they're also traveling and experiencing the world for the first time, and they also want to make friends. It's amazing how easy it is to make connections in that situation. And when my friends come out and they see me now and they travel with me for a short period of time or whatever, they're surprised at how easy it is to make friends and make connections over here. Because when you come from a small hometown, everything's a bit more cliquey, and just approaching someone that you don't know and just introducing yourself can seem a bit daunting and a bit ominous. But when you're traveling, everyone's in the same boat. And sharing a room with someone in a hostel, when you walk in there, you say, "Hey, how's it going?" And immediately they're going to be open to making a connection as well, because when you're staying in a hostel, that's just what you're doing. And then also in the kitchen, the communal spaces, you're going to meet people, and you just sit with a bunch of strangers and you meet them. So I would say that is one of the single best ways that I've found in the backpacker era of my life. As you get older, it becomes a little more tricky for a couple of reasons. One, less people are actually traveling and starting again once you get over 30 versus compared to 18 to 25, where loads of people are commonly going traveling. So you have a smaller pool to build from. And also, most people at this age, they aren't frequenting hostels, for example, because they tend to be a bit more financially stable and also appreciate their privacy a bit more. So there you're leaning into more things like Time Left, and then more like sports groups to find them. Or if you are a remote worker, then there are remote working co-spaces, and they are pretty good for meeting people as well in that environment. And again, most people are friendly and open to chatting, because most people are in a similar boat when you move to the other side of the world. There are a load of expats just like you who are also looking to meet good people. So yeah, I'd highly recommend that front. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a difficulty, which is your family. My nan is 87 years old, and I am well aware that I have a limited amount of time left with her. And those of you that have watched my podcast with her will have seen us talk about this. I just hit the recorder with my foot. I'm just checking I hadn't stopped it. Yeah, and I heard something the other day. Well, not the other day, I've heard this a couple of times now, which is, if you only see your friends once a year, you haven't got 30 years left with your friends. You've got 30 times hanging out with them. And that puts things in perspective when you take it and project that onto your parents or your grandparents' age. If I only go back to the UK once a year which at the moment is about the frequency that I'm doing it. And let's say my nan lives to 92, which is more than any reasonable person could even ask for, right? I haven't got 5 years left with my nan. There's 5 times left that I'm going to see her. And that's hard. That's really hard when she's my favorite person that's on the planet. But I've spoken to her about this off the podcast as well. And she would feel uncomfortable and she would feel guilty if I went and lived in a place that I didn't want to live without the group that around me that I wanted to have around me, without the opportunities that I needed for my life just to spend time with her. And I'm not saying this like I know that I found the right decision in doing this. It's something that I do still frequently think about, and I doubt and question whether I'm making the right decision, doing the right thing. But yeah, again, that's something that you should consider. And one of my clients who was an expat and living in the Middle East, he's just moved back to the UK because of the age of his parents. And he's coming to that realization as well, that he doesn't have that long left and he wants to prioritize that. So yeah, maybe there will come a point where that shifts for me. It's definitely not an easy part of it, and it's not one that I have the answer to for everyone. And I know my mum as well. She really wants grandkids. And let's say I choose to live in Bali, her grandkids are going to be 24 hours flight away. They're going to be 6,000 miles away. That's going to be hard for her. And it's going to be hard for me trying to navigate that, right? And especially when you go traveling, there's a much higher chance that you have an international partner because you meet people from all kinds of backgrounds. And if you both are from different countries with your parents and families in different countries, you are setting yourself up for some challenges in the future. Not that I don't think they can be overcome, but it is something to bear in mind as well. So let's talk again about another benefit. One of the biggest benefits for me is I have a network now of people which I think is much broader than most people's, even though it's a lot shallower, right? Because you have the choice. Your network and your relationships will grow where you water them. If you just water the same tight group, then it's going to be deeper, it's going to flourish more, and you're going to have that deeper connection. But I've obviously chosen to keep moving around and keep meeting new people and building new networks and new relationships. And now I have an extremely broad network where if I speak to someone and I'm looking for expertise in a certain area, I probably know someone, or at least know someone that knows someone that can introduce me to that. So I think for business, it's a good thing to do, to travel, and especially in a place like Bali where most people are digital nomads or entrepreneurs managing their companies remotely, it can be a really good option as well. So I'm going to bring this one home and sort of summarize it. There's a quote which I've heard from Alex Hormozy, but I don't know if it was his originally, which is, you either finish your 20s rich in experiences or rich in wealth. And you have to choose between the two and be comfortable. And I finished my 20s rich in experiences. I spent almost all of my money traveling. I didn't focus on my career until very late into my 20s, where I felt like I was playing catch up. And it's only now that I enter my 30s that I feel like I have caught up, and now I'm starting to break ahead as well. But I know that the experiences that I have made me who I am today and will lead me on a certain path in the future that wouldn't happen if I just stayed at home. And I wouldn't trade that off. I'm very happy with the choices that I've made. Does that mean that I recommend it for everyone? No. You definitely have to be tough. You definitely have to be resilient. And you definitely have to be okay with being by yourself for extended periods of time. You will make friends, but it will be hard getting there, especially if you're trying to replicate the same level of depth and connection that you had at home. But yeah, I wouldn't change a thing. And I hope that if you are thinking of traveling, that this gives you some insights and helps you make your mind up on what's right for you. And if you do go, I wish you every success. I am sure you will make the best memories, and I hope it makes you happy. Thanks for listening.